Hello and welcome to PoliticOly episode 32. This is the PoliticOly guide to the week starting today, Monday, October 19th, 2020. Want to know what to watch for this week, how to get involved, when to make public comment, and how you can help? Stay tuned. I've got some ideas for you. Following the news and upcoming events will be my PoliticOly General Election 2020 Socialist Voters Guide. Don't worry, it's going to be much more brief than the primary election version. So don't worry, it doesn't drag on. I've already talked a lot about the presidential election in particular, so my focus today is on everything else on the ballot. Links for everything I talk about are in the video description below. As always, I welcome comments, questions, interview requests, ideas for collaboration, links, and anything else, so you can find my contact info down in the description below as well. As a small local channel, every like, subscribe, and share is a big boost for me and much appreciated, so thank you in advance. With that said, let's go. We've got some breaking news coming out of Seattle. Here is from king5.com themselves. We have, quote, former Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best will serve as King 5 law enforcement analyst. And I've talked about Chief Best previously on the channel. Essentially, she was looking at a few percent small, tiny chip out of her several $100,000 paycheck, and she decided that was just unacceptable and walked away, retired as the Seattle police chief. And the corporate media, of course, spun this as a big story about, oh man, the protesters just didn't really know what they were doing, and they took out this great, wonderful person, Carmen Best, as collateral damage, and they didn't realize what they were doing. It's just terrible. And of course, so it's ironic that of course the revolving door between capitalist government and corporate media continues to revolve here in this case. So anyway, that news just broke a couple of hours ago. So anywho, today's breaking news. Yesterday's breaking news was the presidential election in Bolivia. So, wonderful news out of Bolivia. The fascist coup government of Janine Áñez, their candidate was Carlos Mesa, and Carlos Mesa today admitted defeat here and congratulated the winner, Luis Arce, with the MAS party, or Movimiento a Socialismo, Instrumento a Político por la Soberanía de los Pueblos. And that's the party name, and it means movement towards socialism, instrument, political instrument for the for sovereignty of the people. So anywho, the socialist political party of Evo Morales, who of course was democratically elected, I believe the first indigenous head of state in the country's recent modern history, we'll call it, and since colonization. And Evo Morales faced many coup attempts and other meddling and harassment by the United States and the rest of the global ruling class, so to speak, and was eventually overthrown in a coup, and was currently hiding, I believe, in Argentina. But anyway, so the party of Evo Morales, MAS, Movement to Socialism, was running last year, and the results of the election were invalidated, right? The media and the powers that be went on this big campaign saying this election wasn't democratic, it's no good, doesn't count, and so to provide cover for the fascist coup led by Janine Áñez and Juan Guaido and others, of course, with the involvement of the CIA and the world powers, so to speak. And so, anyway, that's the backdrop. And so, fast forward a year later to this year, to yesterday, they run this presidential election again. It's, basically indisputable as far as I'm aware. And as far as the legitimacy of the election, and MAS, Movimiento a Socialismo, victory by something like 20 points. So a true landslide victory. Imagine if a presidential election ended by a 20-point gap here in the United States. That would be the landslide of a century, right? So there's no, downplaying this victory by socialism and indigenous leadership in Bolivia. So love and solidarity to my Bolivian comrades, and congratulations. And the rest of us can learn from the work that you've done. I will also, and this on the screen, by the way, is from Telesur English, which is a news page. And so that's a good source, primary source to go find an article about breaking news in Latin America. Google or run a search for the term and Telesur English, and you'll usually find a good article there. And this is a tweet by Bernie just a few hours ago, congratulating Luis Arce. Bernie says, "The Bolivian people made their voices heard in yesterday's election after a difficult year-long fight to restore democracy. As Minister of Economy, Mr. Arce helped slash poverty and inequality. I congratulate him on his victory and wish him well." So thank you to Bernie for standing with the Latin American people as very few other national level politicians in America have. So I'd like to move on to a Thurston County COVID-19 update. And here, this is the Thurston County Public Health and Social Services COVID-19 data webpage. And basically we can see cases of all ages coming in every day. So about 1,600 cases here in Thurston County so far. And I saw that the front page headline in the Olympian today was something along the lines of how the mobile testing center, I believe out of St. Pete's, because they increased the accessibility of the testing, that is partly explains the rise in cases that we've seen. And, I would just point out that means there are probably a lot more cases out there in Thurston County that haven't been identified because they didn't have that access. So undoubtedly, based on that, I think it's a safe assumption that it's even more widespread in Thurston than the numbers. How much, we don't know, but certainly concerning. And there was another nursing home outbreak here recently, over the past week. But as I said, we're seeing all ages of folks contracting COVID. Um, and so basically, don't let your guard down, right? Don't let the deniers get to you either. The pandemic is very real, and it is ongoing and basically worsening at this point nationally. We have thankfully been relatively fortunate here in Thurston County, but we should not take that for granted. And so keep up the safety measures and take care of yourself as we move here into the winter, into flu season. Try to build up your immune system. Make sure you get your flu shots, more important than ever this year. So please get your flu shots and keep it up. So, and I would also suggest that this winter, if you can, if you have the resources, if you're in a position to do so, you want to make sure you have supplies in case there is some kind of either power outage, natural disaster or shutdown or any kind of situation. And make sure you have supplies to be able to take care of someone who is sick, whether that's the flu or with whatever. And if you're in a position to do so. And of course, we have to always remember that a lot of folks aren't in a position to do so. There's a lot of folks struggling with houselessness and other conditions that leave them particularly vulnerable at this time. So as leftists, we always, of course, keep that in mind in what we do and our focus. And so if you would like to support some community aid efforts for folks, I suggest two organizations that I suggest that you can contribute to that can get direct aid to the people immediately are Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, or OLYMAP, and Eggy Hop, which is Emma Goldman Youth and Homeless Outreach Project. And the links to those both organizations are below as well. So if you're not sure where to volunteer or contribute to that's going to get directly to people in the community immediately, those are some great organizations. So this is an article on local news blog Olympia Tribune. By Mindy Chambers from October 16th, titled City to Sweep Car Campers from Insign Road. The city of Olympia is telling residents of parked vehicles along the Insign Road near St. Peter Hospital that they must move these vehicles by October 27th. That's a week from tomorrow, of course. End quote. And so basically, they had just cleared all the RV folks off of Deschutes Parkway, and they just keep kicking them off one road or another. And the governments here in Thurston County they need to stop just kicking people around. They need to designate property. The county owns property. There are various jurisdictions that own property in Thurston County, and they just need the will and the motivation and the sense of urgency and basic human decency to designate legal camping and RV parking areas where people won't be harassed, and also the funding, of course, to provide adequate services, because that's critical. People have a right to be able to have somewhere to throw things away and wash their hands, and go to the bathroom. And so I encourage you to make a public comment to the Board of County Commissioners, to your local city council, to your representatives, towards that effect, as well as supporting the aforementioned organizations. As well as, I would add that OLYMAP, the organization I mentioned before, that's the direct aid split from the former organization Just Housing. Now Just Housing, well, not former organization, it continues on, but right, the pieces of it split. So Just Housing now is the one for political advocacy. So if that is your interest and you would like to connect to folks that are effectively pushing for increased representation for marginalized individuals in our community, Just Housing is a great organization to reach out to. Anyway, so just as a really quick public service announcement here, in case you missed it. Oh, I know. I'm sorry for putting that on your screen. But just, this is a warning, okay? So, because Tamborine Borelli, who ran as a Bernie-crat, progressive in 2016 and was a delegate for Bernie and connected with a lot of folks in the Thurston County and surrounding area progressive movements and organizations. Well, you can see what happened here on the screen. She went full Trump. And so I was just alerted to this because Mike Figueredo with the Humanist Report tweeted about it. I believe she had been on his show and so on. And so he felt upset about that, rightfully so. And so thanks to Mike for pointing that out because I was still following Tamborine. And still I have, looks like 58 fellow followers here that are still following Tamborine on Twitter. So anyway, just a heads up there. Yikes. Yeah, no thanks. Bye. All right. So I want to highlight a local independent media organization just because I hadn't actually gotten a chance to do a shout out for these folks yet on PoliticOly. So I had to get them in here so you all are aware as well. This is Uphill Media on YouTube, and they are a Washington State progressive coalition of folks. There's some sort of Bernie-crat types and other progressives in there, and they've got various shows and hosts and interviews and all kind of stuff. So go follow Uphill Media. And I wanted to, in particular, point out here their recent interview with, first of all, Savage Joy Marie Mann did an interview with Angela Walker, which is great. But the one I wanted to show you is the show is titled The Accidental Activist, and it's an interview with Shama Sawant, featuring Jason Call on this interview as well, with Chanda Masta, the host. But anyway, that's a great interview, and so I encourage you to go watch that. The link is of course below. And Shama talks about the decision of Socialist Alternative to support Howie Hawkins in this election. They had supported Bernie in the past, but Shama explained essentially that it was time to show left unity and show that there is a third-party alternative to the mainstream political party, and that we have to have that unity and show that in order to essentially get anywhere, to be taken seriously and get to the next level in terms of creating a people's party that can be a major party in this country, that retains the internal democracy and the community involvement in the platform, which is actually lived up to those characteristics of a truly grassroots party that is not corrupt. And so because Jason Call had gone the other way on the presidential vote, had supported Biden, and they had a respectful, discussion about that. So, among, many other topics. So that's a great interview. And again, go subscribe to Uphill Media. You can see their show The Dive, which is like a weekday, news roundup, kind of like PoliticOly, kind of like this show, but for statewide, and there's multiple hosts on there. So it's good stuff, and perhaps we will collaborate at some point. Let's see. So this is an upcoming event tomorrow from 6 to 7, but it's on Zoom online. And this is called History Talks. That's the name of the series here. This particular one is called In Search of the Treaty Tree. And this is hosted by the city of Lacey and is basically a historical information lecture about some local history with regard to Isaac Stevens and the Native American genocide that happened here, and how that history evolved and persists, and why it's important to learn it. And so that's tomorrow. The link is below. Also tomorrow, as is the case most Tuesdays, is the Olympia City Council meeting. And so I encourage you to make a public comment if you have something to say. And if not, I suggest sending in written public comments. I know you've got some opinions, right? And the way I think about it is remind yourself, if you're shy about commenting, you're like, yeah, it's common sense, like, whatever. I won't comment. Remind yourself, there are all sorts of right-wingers out there, okay? Angry folks, jerks. They make their opinions known using these public comment processes, and so we should too. The left should be the most numerous voices of influence, without, regardless of whether you believe they're going to, listen to you or be influenced by you. Just remember that context of, we need to speak our compassion and our ideals and beliefs through the lens of local policy, and make those public comments. I'll just point out really quick, on the City of Olympia webpage here, you can find agendas, you can find contact information, you can find the videos. So you missed the council meeting, you can watch the video later, and all kind of stuff on here. Great website. I encourage you to keep an eye on it. This event is this coming Thursday, the 22nd of October, at the Tacoma Police Headquarters. So just sharing this one, sort of a regional event here, hosted by Lawyers Against Systemic Racism, or LASER. So that sounds like a great event up in Tacoma. And as always, the link is below. This one is coming up this Saturday, the 24th, in Seattle. Justice for Renee and Mazi. And this is 1 to 4 p.m. And the link is below with the location. But this one is to recognize 4 years since the King County sheriffs murdered Renee and her unborn baby October 21st. So rest in peace, and if you are in the Seattle area, that vigil and community rally is going on Saturday. Ballots are out in Washington State, and many of you have probably already voted, hopefully some of you. But here's a brief voter's guide for Thurston County from a leftist perspective for the general election, November 3rd, 2020. I'm not going to go race by race through the whole ballot because this is the general election. So as leftists, that means this is not really where the action is at. The action, and by action I mean potential for revolutionary change, is mostly in the primaries. By the time we reach this point, most of the leftists have been successfully culled from the electoral system, and there are few real choices remaining. There are some exceptions. All right. And before we move on, I'll just point out you can find the links to all the pages I'm looking at below. This is the Thurston County current elections page for the current election. You can check your registration, find a drop box, track your ballot, which I encourage you to do if you are wondering whether your ballot was picked up, whether it was counted yet. Go to vote.wa.gov or vote.wa.gov. They have a few that redirect you, but basically go to the Washington State page for checking your ballot status. And that way, if there were some kind of issue with your signature not matching or something else, then you would be able to correct that, what's known as curing the ballot. And that happens. Our signatures naturally evolve over the years, and sometimes we have a signature that's more legalese and one that's more casual, and so on. And so these things happen, and so it's good to just check on your ballot status after you turn it in. And thanks to the Thurston County elections for this webpage. And just for full disclaimer, I used to work for Thurston County elections for a while in 2016-17, but only as a temp. So I was a temporary ballot processing aide and sort of a temp office assistant. So I'm by no means, any kind of an expert or professional. Just I saw some of the process firsthand, and I would just say that I have a lot of faith in the election system itself physically here in Washington State. So much appreciation for the staff and the professionalism that make that happen. So this is the statewide voters pamphlet. And we are going to start with referendum number 90. So one of the exceptions to what I was saying earlier about primaries in the general is the initiatives and referendums in Washington State. Now, unfortunately, this year we had the COVID crisis happen, and a lot of initiatives were not able to get enough signatures to get on the ballot. In this case, they were able to use electronic signature gathering, but in most cases, most of the initiatives this year were not able to meet that requirement. And so this is the only one. There's no initiatives. This is a referendum, which means it's something that the legislature passed, that then people collected enough signatures to say, well, you passed this, but the people should vote on it. So it's going to go on the ballot and we'll vote on it. And this one in particular is with regard to sex ed classes for kids in our education system statewide. And this was actually news to me until recently, but apparently 40% of Washington state school districts currently have no sex ed classes at all, which just seems wacky to me. I did not know that. But currently, the law reads that it is up to each individual school district to decide whether they are going to have sex ed classes in that district or not. And so what Ref 90 does is create a statewide standard, so every child in Washington has access to the same quality level of education, no matter which district they are in. So I support this referendum, rather. So I think you should support it as well. It was a good bill, and basically, like, it's just right-wing panicky nonsense against it. So come on, approve Ref 90. Next, though, there is constitutional amendments, and sometimes those can be more minor and sometimes more major. I'm just skipping over all the advisory votes. This ridiculous nonsense, useless waste of time. But back to the topic at hand, which is the constitutional amendments. In this case, it's Senate Joint Resolution 8212, which regards investment of public funds. I'll give you my opinion on this, but first of all, like, constitutional amendments, as I was saying, some are minor, some are major. This one's on the more minor side, but we'll take a look at it anyway. So this would allow the state funds, which are supposed to be set aside to support long-term care services for the elderly and so on. It would allow them, currently under the state constitution, they have to invest those in government bonds and government secured programs like that. And this amendment would change the state constitution to allow them to invest that money in Wall Street, in private funds. And so personally, I don't think this is a good idea. Basically, I'm not a fan of Wall Street. I feel like Wall Street is just more a gauge of the mood of the ruling class at the time. It's not really real, you know. It's not a good thing to be basing things like the basic rights and dignity of our citizenry in those markets. And that's my opinion. I think we should have a state bank that handles those investments and handles that fund. And Senator Bob Hasagawa, actually, who has been one of the biggest champions of a state bank for years, actually co-wrote the argument against this amendment. And Bob Hasagawa knows what he's talking about with regard to economic and financial issues, and him and I are on the same page on this one. That said, the Strangers editorial board disagrees with us, and they say we should do this, we should approve it, because we need to do anything that we can to increase the available amount of money for those long-term care services. And that's, I guess, a reasonable argument as well. I can see a reasonable case on both sides. I just think we can do better. Some races are interesting because our top two primary system has put two Democrats in the general election facing off and left Republicans completely out of it. The first one on our ballot here, and I'm going to skip this one. So the first one on our ballot here is Beth Dolio versus Marilyn Strickland for our National House of Representatives. The primary was a bit more complicated in CD10 here, but for leftists, this is pretty clear at this point. Beth Dolio is the best option here. Exactly how much she will, in fact, stand up to the Democratic establishment remains to be seen, but she's certainly running as a progressive, and there's no doubt she would be better than her predecessor, Denny Heck, who is deeply tied to big money interest for decades. And not to mention, Strickland's background is CEO of the Seattle Chamber of Commerce and so on. So, yeah, if you want to continue the big money representation, that's Strickland for you. But I'm voting for Dolio. And I just think that we should elect Beth Dolio and then try to be a very engaged and motivated community, political community, to continue to push her as far left on a variety of different issues. Some, she won't need much pushing, and some she will. And so, just like in any case, no matter who's elected, that is the case. But that's where we're at here in CD10. I will also note that Beth would be our nation's first openly bisexual congressperson if elected. I don't base votes primarily on personal characteristics of the candidates. However, representation is important, and bisexual people deserve to finally see bisexual leaders succeed in national politics, and this would be a step in that direction. So, as a bisexual man myself, I thank Representative Dolio for her work fighting biphobia in our society in this way. The only other partisan race that's any question, really, is lieutenant governor. Denny Heck is, of course, are leaving the post that we were just looking at, and to run for lieutenant governor. And that was a big time role. It was getting him on TV all the time because he was talking bad about Trump, and he was successful with that. So why would he leave that to run for lieutenant governor, which is a position who, most Washingtonians don't even know what the lieutenant governor is? Not that it's not important, but the reason there is he wants to be governor. So, and that's just theoretical, of course, but I think a lot of people can see the writing on the wall there. And Inslee is expected to secure a third term, in which case, he's trying to position himself as the successor there. So, anyway, I support Marco Lias. Marco is endorsed by all sorts of progressive groups, and folks that I know and local folks that I trust are all voting for Marco Lias. So, clearly, by everyone's measure, the more progressive one in the race there for lieutenant governor. Most of these races I'm not even going to comment on, because I was saying by the time it gets to the general election, I tend to vote for all of these Democrats because the alternatives are awful. Take the superintendent of public instruction as an example. If you don't know anything about either of these two people, Chris Reichdahl and Maya Espinosa, and you just read their blurbs in the voters pamphlet, they both sound like decent reasonable people, right? But Maya Espinosa is pretty far right wing in terms of supporting charter schools, and she's against Referendum 90. She doesn't think we should have sex ed class at all in the schools. If I recall correctly what she had said on that. But essentially, like, I don't even really like Chris Reichdahl, but yeah, this one's easy. And the rest of these races are basically the same. So, up to you what you want to do with that, but no need for me to go on about most of these. So, I will just skip down here to mention Carolina Mejia here. I just we skipped Carolina, but for the Thurston County Commissioners, please support Carolina Mejia, and if you can spare a last-minute donation to just one local candidate this year in Thurston County, donate to Carolina, because she's got to beat C. Davis by a landslide. He's got to lose hard. He's terrible. We got to get him out of here. So anyway, best of luck to you, Carolina. The remaining question marks on the ballot are 3 judicial races. Sharonda Amamilo for Superior Court was endorsed by the Green Party of South Puget Sound. Whoops, I'm on the wrong one here on the screen. There we go. So this is Thurston County Superior Court Judge Position 8. This is a local one. And I support Sharonda Amamilo. She was endorsed by the Green Party of South Puget Sound, along with, of course, many other groups, and is just the most, the best candidate for the position here. In 2018, in recognition for her service as a woman of achievement, the YWCA of Olympia is quoted saying Sharonda is an unsung hero in our community, and they noted her work to incorporate restorative justice principles, which I support. The other 2 are for the state Supreme Court, Raquel Montoya Lewis. There we go. The state Supreme Court position 3, which is Raquel Montoya Lewis, the person I encourage you to support. Just very well qualified candidate compared to the other who is not. Montoya Lewis is a former professor, a chief judge for Lummi Nation, Upper Skagit, and Nooksack Indian tribes, and she was appointed to fill a vacancy by Inslee and became only the 2nd Native American to sit on any state Supreme Court and the first enrolled tribal member. Whew, that is both sad and inspiring in terms of what Raquel has accomplished. So yeah, so support her in running to fill that term. And finally here we have G. Helen Whitener, and G stands for Grace Helen Whitener, and she is the first Black LGBTQ judge in Washington State. She's an out lesbian, and only the 2nd Black member of the State Supreme Court at all. She was also appointed and is running to fill the remainder of a term. If you look her up on YouTube, by the way, you will find her TED Talk. Actually, that's linked below too, and several interviews to get an idea of what Grace Helen Whitener is like. And I encourage you to do so. And in general, I always encourage folks to go look up video clips of every candidate. If you're not sure who to vote for, go hear him speak for a few minutes, and that'll really help you out. So basically, That's that. So, the rest of it is up to you. You can vote for a presidential candidate too, but I've already talked at length about that on this show previously. And, you can see where I'm at personally, but I totally understand some of the logic some folks are using to vote Biden as well. Totally get it. And that choice is up to you. But as a leftist myself, I want to vote for socialists, right? So that's where I'm at. But that's my general election voters guide 2020. And stay tuned, because as I always say, the primary is where it's at. And as soon as the general election is over, it's primary season again. 2021. As leftists, we need to be ahead of the curve. Think about the 2021 primaries right now. There will be city council seats up for election and several other local positions that are very important. So cast your last 2020 vote, drop it off, and let's keep rolling. Join me live on election night for my initial results reaction video. In fact, once this loads, the Thurston County Elections Office, you can actually watch the security cameras at the ballot processing center. So you can see the ballots coming in and getting sorted and so on. And so, as I mentioned previously, disclosing that I had gotten a firsthand look as a temp worker in the elections office here, I don't trust a lot of political situation elements, right? I don't trust capitalist media. I don't trust political parties. I don't trust political establishment leadership, and so on. But the nuts and bolts of it here in Washington State, I do trust. I think our system is pretty solid, and that's just my personal opinion. If you've got skepticism, that's totally fine. That's your right, and you should be skeptical because you should learn more. And so it's never loaded. Huh. Well, that's funny. Well, I don't know what's going on with this on my screen right now, but you can see the pictures over here on the left. And basically the idea is that you can look in on the live feeds at the ballot processing center. So anyway, just kind of interesting to do that and take a look behind the scenes, what is going on. So, so that's my show for today, October 19th, 2020, PoliticOly episode 32. That's a wrap. I appreciate you all for tuning in, and I'd love to hear you down in the comments, whatever you would like to communicate. You can find me on Twitter at OlyPolitic. At OlyPolitic for show updates, and at Oli Stewart for my main account, or by email at PoliticOly@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a good week. Love, peace, and solidarity.